Welcome to Flash Frights. You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. Flash Frights, welcome back to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Sharpnell. So, Pete, we've talked about a lot of 80s movies because we grew up in the 80s during a time when we were cursorily exposed to things like the Satanic Panic, the rise of role-playing, Dungeons & Dragons, the Tom Hanks starring made-for-TV movie Maze and Monsters.
Saw that when it aired.
And that was a movie that kind of, in some ways, brought Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing, albeit in a very negative light. This is what your children are doing. You have to stop it because Satan lives in these dice and you can't let them do that, or listen to music because heavy metal will destroy them. See the movie Trick or Treat, or see any of those movies like The Gate, Evil Speaker, Prince of Darkness. There is a devil. There is something dark out there. And there's a potential for heavy metal music and or a pair of dice to open a portal to an evil world. In the UK, they had a version called the Video Nasties, censors there that were literally censoring and taking movies off video store shelves because they deemed those movies to be too violent or nudity or any sort of the explicit graphic nature. A lot of this was part of a conservative movement, a lot of clutching of pearls. Nevertheless, again, because we can see this in hindsight, we can see the damage that a lot of this did. And there's a movie that came out not too long ago in 2021 called Censor, which was one of the few movies that I've seen that has kind of taken a look back, not necessarily trying to do what we've seen a lot now in movies like Late Night with the Devil or In a Violent Nature that are cues to movie that would probably certainly have been banned and would have been criticized in the Satanic Panic era, but rather a movie that actually looks at the censors, the people who were censoring the video nasties.
This depiction is dangerous.
Come on, ain't it?
I'm cutting it.
Butchery, sadism, murder.
A wave of depraved and corrupt horror video.
Confusing fiction with reality.
Doug Smart, producer, Ident Investment Films. Maybe Enid could watch my latest Frederick North submission. Wanted a woman's eye on his film.
There's this actress. I've got this feeling that's Nina. Oh, my sister. You know, if someone did take it, then they're still out there.
You've never been clear on exactly what you remember.
You'd be surprised what the human brain can edit out when it can't handle the truth.
Someone's losing the plot.
I was wondering if you had anything else on this actress. What's going to happen to her?
That's top secret.
People think that I create horror. Horror is already out there in all of us.
A movie that I was not familiar with. Is this a movie that you'd heard anything about until I kind of threw it on your radar for this conversation?
Yeah, no, not at all. And full disclosure, I haven't seen it yet, but you did send me the trailer, which I watched, which had me intrigued for a number of different reasons, which I'll chime in on. But yeah, no, this was not on my radar at all. But like after we had talked with
Daniel Richardson,
producer of the upcoming documentary Slasher Trash, who is from around Newcastle in the UK. And we got into a little bit of a conversation with him about the video nasties. So once I saw that was kind of the subject of this film, I'm like, ooh, Bernie's going on a video nasty kick. So yeah, I'm curious to know more about it, what you thought, because it takes place in the 80s during the video nasty craze in the UK, correct?
Absolutely right. Yeah, I'll give you the short plot summary. So yeah, it's set in 1985. during the infamous video nasties, I guess moral panic, we'll call it that. And you have the main character, Enid, who works for the British Board of Film Classification. And she has the nickname Little Miss Perfect. Gives you a sense for her character because she's very strict, vigilant regarding like censoring and editing violent content. Throughout the movie, you can tell that she's haunted by some sort of childhood trauma revolving around the disappearance of her sister, Nina. And that seems to kind of come up in flashbacks, especially as she's watching these films that show violence, depict violence against younger women. And then there's a murder that's tied in the press to a film that she approved through her censors that triggers media scrutiny. And then she starts getting public threats because the idea is that the public's like, well, the censors are supposed to protect us and our kids. And now because this murder happened, that seems to be influenced by a movie that you people, the censors who are supposed to protect us, approved. So then she gets drawn into a director of one of these video nasties, Frederick North. The plot of the movie he's shooting seems to mirror the facts behind her sister's disappearance. And that's where she starts talking to her parents, who feel that maybe she might be losing a bit of her touch with reality because it doesn't seem like her memories track with their desire to honestly kind of move on. And she doesn't want to move on, let alone when she's exposed to this film that in uncanny fashion has way too many coincidences to her memories, which we seem to see are very much skewed to her because her parents don't remember it the same way. She encounters the director because that to her is kind of like the source of maybe more information. How did you make this movie? Why did you make this movie? The spiraling begins, that sort of like blurring of reality.
2, 3.
Great ending that, to be fair, is a little bit telegraphed, but it is satisfying. Everything is sort of trapped in this sort of VHS era aesthetic. So the ending makes sense. Her fantasy, her sister's disappearance, and then more specifically, just kind of putting a light on the role of the censor during mid-1980s UK, video nasty panic.
I got the sense from watching the trailer that you get introduced, and I think this might have been a clip with her talking to her parents about her sister. It seemed like there was a lot of characters that get introduced who may or may not know more than they're initially telling. Is that a fair assessment of how this plays out?
Absolutely. And it kind of leans again into like her paranoia, where are the people telling her the truth, but she's reading into it more than there's actually there to read into? Or are they hiding something from her, which again, just kind of really sets up a character to be properly motivated to go where she goes. That's the one of the things I'll compliment the film on. And it was directed by Prano Bailey-Bond, who also co-wrote the screenplay with Anthony Fletcher. The synth score, very reminiscent of Carpenter. There's our reference, our John Carpenter style score. Everything has that 1980s horror atmosphere. It all looks, sounds, and feels right. And also her journey into the darkness. Because again, in order for her to find more info, Little Miss Perfect has to go into the world of filmmakers who make video nasties. And she doesn't want to be exposed to this, just like she in her work is dutiful in not allowing others to be exposed to it. But if she's going to get her answers, she has to. She has to see these filmmakers who are more than willing to put sex and violence on the screen.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like, again, you've got a lead character. And when this is done well, I think it can be really effective in a film who, you're kind of introduced to them as, I'm saying rigid in terms of like, she seems to be very focused on what her job is. Her life probably is very regimented in certain ways. And then, a lot of the tension gets introduced when it starts to spiral and you're looking at someone, how are they trying to hold it all together when they have such a very, specific way of living, but then all of a sudden that gets frayed. Now they're introduced with all like the unknowns and the questions, and how does someone who is so structured able to deal with and hopefully overcome all that gets introduced into their lives.
Yeah, 100%. Good read, because they do kind of visually show her as like a buttoned up character, literally, where like some of her costuming, like the dresses she wears, feel very conservative, which kind of lean into that whole like Thatcher era conservatism. And you could tell like she's one of the people that would buy into the hysteria that was happening at the time. Oh, these movies are a danger and I'm here to protect. Throwing in that like objective duty with her own personal obsession is where the movie really kind of shines. Again, a little bit telegraphed, but she has to start making compromises regarding like her duty and her beliefs if she's going to get the answers that she's seeking.
Well, my fancy was certainly tickled watching the trailer with the visual aesthetics. There's like those really deep red and cyans that evoke the 80s for sure, and was reminding me a little bit of like Strange Darling, which has like this like just red soaked hue in different scenes, and blue as well. That wash of color is so powerful, and for many people that grew up in the 80s, so evocative of growing up in the 80s. Sometimes it's a bit of a false memory, I think. I know I've had this conversation with Graham, who's been on the show before, because he's a couple of years younger than I am, and he would always talk about like he's like jealous that John Zemsky, who's also been a guest, and I grew up in the 80s, like in the heyday of the 80s, and like I wasn't like we weren't living like the Breakfast Club. It wasn't like that so much, but like I'm glad that you think that we had like this incredibly glamorous and glitzy Hollywood lifestyle that growing up on Long Island. But it just,
were you not partying at the Tech Noir nightclub that we saw in James Cameron's Terminator?
Yeah. Like, you would see us dancing in the background while Jerry Dandridge is stalking, his victims in Fright Night. That was us kind of partying it up in the 80s. That's what we did.
Come with me if you want to live forever.